and welcome to the third virtual CIO Conclave and Awards being organized by Elets Technomedia. We are here today for a fireside chat on the digital future of pharma and healthcare with Mr. Dhaval Pandya, Corporate Chief Information Officer, Piramal Enterprises Limited. Welcome, Mr. Pandya.
Hello, Garima. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining us for this fireside chat, and we look forward to your in-depth and insightful views on this subject. So, my first question to you, sir, would be around the technologies. If you could talk about the various technologies that are shaping the future of pharma and healthcare.
So, thanks a lot, Garima, for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be on this discussion here. Uh, a very important and a relevant question, I would say, because I think the in or the buzzword today is digital, right? And a lot of investments today are going into the digital technologies. And if anything, the entire pandemic situation has only accelerated the investments that are being made in these technologies, because there is some bit of inhibition when it comes to the physicality of things. While the world is moving away from that and restoring to normal, I think there are certain habits and certain ways of working, if I may use, that have been ingrained over the period of past 25 odd months, and I think they are here to stay, and we'll keep evolving from there. So if you talk about the digital technology, in particular in pharma, I think we can look at it in two broad buckets. I would say the technologies that impact the operational aspects, and the technologies that do not impact the operational aspects. And the ones that do not impact the operational aspects, I would say, again, categorized into two. Maybe one would be the regulatory and the compliance aspects of things, and the other would be the support functions, or the entire back office part of it. So a lot of investments are being made when it comes to pharma and healthcare, and these are two different animals in themselves, right? Because pharma is more an manufacturing intensive and an asset intensive kind of a function, or an industry, whereas the healthcare is more the B2C or the consumer facing. So what matters more in one doesn't really hit the other. So it's basically like having two different animals to deal with. So when it comes to the core pharma, I think a lot of investments are moving towards the entire industry 4.0 aspect, where we are talking about the next generation of manufacturing. We are talking about connected machines, human to machine interaction and communication, decision decentralization, the entire observability part, the information transparency part, and how basically we can use IoT to be able to do smart manufacturing. And what means here is that how do I basically manufacture more for less? I think that's how you can sum it up, to say that how can you get the most out of the investments that you have made, or how can you make the product in a much lesser cost compared to what it was made at, or how can you make, while you're still preserving the efficacy of the product and the entire health aspects of it. So a lot of investments going into these aspects. And when it comes to the entire consumer health part of things, I think it is largely around the entire consumer engagement and the entire B2C part of things. So, for example, how do you monitor the entire consumption pattern of medicines? For example, how do you make the medicine delivery more streamlined, or bring in the aspects of the entire marketplace here? How do you offer the product to the customer at the right place, at the right time, at the lowest cost? Right. So these kind of things, these are the kind of technologies that people are delving with here, and a completely different breed of technologies when it comes in. I think the entire AI, ML, blockchain, the entire consumer engagement, customer experience transformation, moments of truth, customer journeys. I think all of these aspects come to the fore when you talk about the entire consumer health part of things.
Right, right. So the sector saw, a lot of transformation, as it happened. So if you could probably, lead us into, how was it? How was the journey? How did it all began, because it was a sudden scenario. It was unexpected. Nobody, imagined that. So how was it for you at Piramal? How did you sail through this entire period?
So we as a group have, I would say proudly, and to be very honest, we have been someone who looks at technology very differently. We look at it as a differentiator. We see the value in it. So a lot of investments were already on the anvil or being made to be able to reap the benefits of it. And I think it became a natural extension for us. Maybe we may have had to rush into certain aspects, but if I talk about it, it wasn't such a knee jerk for us actually. While for most, when the way of working was largely physical, and the way and the entire operational aspects were also physical, the entire ecosystem was also physical, the entire partner supplier collaboration was also physical. For us, we have been leveraging technologies to the best extent possible, at least in the identified areas. And so for us, it was I would say not so much of a problem. Yes, there would have been certain aspects here and there with regards to making the right devices available to the people to be able to enable them to work from home. But for example, we were already using collaboration platforms very sharply. We were already using remote ways of working very sharply. We had already invested into the RPA RTs of the world to be able to draw synergies from redundant processes and to be able to optimize them further. So I think it was a reasonably okay, I would say, kind of a scenario for us. Not too much of a difficulty going there.
Right, right, right. Thank you for that. Also, we've seen that pharma and healthcare, though are among the most regulated sectors in the world. At the same time, they're highly competitive industries in the world. So, what are the kind of challenges do you face in the digital integration when it comes to this scenario?
So it's a very multifold challenge actually, Garima, because if you talk about the core pharma sector and if you talk about say an aspect like drug discovery, a drug discovery, you would be well aware that is a very long drawn and iterative process. And I think as a rule of thumb, it roughly takes about 10 years to be able to make a drug marketable, and it roughly costs you about $1 billion. That's the amount of time, effort, and money that goes into every single aspect of drug discovery. But if you talk about, say, the pandemic situation that hit you, you really couldn't wait a decade to be able to get a vaccine. So I think a lot of technologies such as artificial intelligence and predictive natures and analytics would have helped here to be able to identify where you need to spend the most, or where do you need to concentrate the most, and which aspects can be speeded up to be able to hit the market faster, right? And like you rightly mentioned, it's a very controlled and regulatory kind of an industry because we are dealing with lives of people here. So there is really no room for error, or room to compromise, if I would say. And again, like you said, that it was for mass consumption. We are largely looking for mass consumption for generics and things like those. So it becomes very, very cost competitive as well. So then the entire question then remains is that how do you either make something for less, or you make something more for the investment that is already made. So there are two aspects to it. How do you operationally utilize the assets much in a much better manner to be able to get a better output, or for example, how do you basically retain the level of output and at the same time you reduce the investments by automating certain processes or using things like RPA RTA, using artificial intelligence and machine learning to be able to draw certain benefits that can be done, made out of the things, the way you work. Um, so the whole thing here then, and also you have to remember that the entire manufacturing setup is largely a factor of the product that you're also producing. It's not a very generic investment that you make. It's a very, very specific investment. And mergers and acquisitions is extremely normal for this industry. So largely a company would have grown through organic and inorganic, and when it grows through inorganic, then it acquires the assets, it acquires the people and the culture. At the same time, it acquires the market also in which it is operating. So this entire integration, and largely I think on the cultural side of things, because there is a different workforce that becomes a part of your fold now. So I think integrating them into your ways of working, and at the same time integrating the entire regulatory and compliance aspects of the industry in which you have done the acquisition, that becomes extremely important to gel with. So I think it becomes a part of the value system, or the way the things are driven drop down. At the same time, how do you have identified the capabilities that you think are working well for you, and then you roll it out to scale for the companies that, for example, you have acquired, or for the products that you have acquired. I think that's where the entire challenge lies, and that's where the entire focus goes.
Right, right. It's interesting you talked about, AI in the pharma sector. And we've seen, advancements of AI technologies, and they've brought a spectrum of applications when it comes to biomedical and pharmaceutical industry. Starting from computer vision enabled by deep learning algorithms to all that. So when it comes to, what is your opinion on the impacts of AI on pharma and healthcare industry in the future, in the coming times?
So I think it will have an extremely huge impact on this. For example, if you just talk about two aspects of pharma, right? If you talk about the drug discovery and the clinical trials, there's the two aspects here. So the drug discovery, like I mentioned, it's a huge time cost and effort investment that has to go in, and a lot of this goes because of the iterations that you have to make. Right now, for example, if you talk about the recent advancements that have been made in medical science, for example, like predicting the protein folds or the alpha folds and things like those, then that can then be utilized, and you can have capabilities or algorithms written to be able to leverage these capabilities, so that it reduces the number of iterations, and every iteration is a time investment. It is also a cost investment, right? So how do you basically squeeze down the time of the entire drug discovery and be able to arrive at the conclusions in a much faster and a cost effective manner? I think AI or something like, for example, the entire neural networks or the deep learning would be extremely important here, because it can derive from what has been happening, and it can use them to make predictions. So we are able, for example, rather than trying 10 combinations, you may want to try only two combinations, which means that you're practically reducing the entire effort by 20%, and maybe the cost reduces by a larger factor, not even 20%, but it may be quite more, depending on whether you are doing an early state discovery or you're doing a late state discovery or it is mainstream. So it has extremely important relevance, and I think it will only grow from strength to strength. The challenge is going to be about how do you provide it meaningful data, because there is a learning aspect with every AI investment that you make, and it learns from the way you work. So how do you basically provide it more, not just more data, but provide it data to be able to learn faster and learn in a more efficient manner, so that the number of failure points come down drastically. That was the first part. If you talk about the clinical trials part of it, so this entire aspect of you have to do a patient acquisition, you have to do a patient trial, you have to do, and then there is post trial monitoring as well. So a lot of AI and ML kind of activities can be deployed here as well, right? From trying to identify the right sample set for the trial that you are doing, right? So for example, it may take multiple factors as to what is the propensity of the trial subject that you're talking about, how has he reacted to the past, if he's been in any of the trials, what is his adherence to the schedule, for example, for taking the drugs. And then there could be something like smart devices and smart bottles, which also being spoken about, which basically monitors whether the subject is actually taking the medicine as per the prescriptions or not. So it's a completely new gamut, and a completely it's a completely world in itself to be discovered. And I think we while we start small, I think we will only increase the number of if we see increasing number of investments that go into these areas, and these investments will also make it affordable for people to be use these without any cost initiative, because it's a very important thing that whatever propositions are coming to the market are cost viable. And I think that's where AI and AML will play a huge role, because they will help you cut down the total outlay that you have to make, and then that can be passed on to the marketable options that are being made here.
So we are talking about a future, that requires probably an entire 360-degree transformation, for the sector at large. Do you think the kind of infrastructure that we have, or the kind of skill sets that we have, will be able to match the requirements of the future, seeing the current trends that we are facing right now?
So if you talk about any transformation, Garima, there are three aspects to it, right? There is the people, the process, and the technology. And I think pharma is no different. It has to go through the same grind. How are we progressing? I would say that in my personal opinion, maybe pharma is not progressing as fast as some of the other industries, but it is also aspect of the nature of the industry in itself, because there are regulatory and compliance aspects associated with the food and drugs, with the pharma kind of sectors, which are far more stringent, and you have to be a little more careful compared to some of the other industries. So are we geared up for it? I would say yes. Are we possibly looking at the same kind of trajectory as somewhere else? I would say no. It will take it a little more time, and rightly so. And when it comes to skills, I think there is already a dearth of skills that we are seeing, as with regards to the new age technologies or the transformational technologies that we're talking about. And we can't just rely on new workforce coming in and trying to do it. Reskilling is the only option. So how do you basically learn, unlearn, relearn? I think that is the entire game that we are looking at as far as the skilling is concerned. And I think that even in terms of, and I think the management directive and the value system of the company plays a very important role here. while it is easier said than done that you retain the workforce and you do this and do that, if we are already talking about the great resignation wave, right? People are getting offers which you haven't heard of in the recent past, and backfills is becoming a challenge. So basically, how do you employ meaningfully with the worker, and especially with the work from home and work from anywhere and these kind of scenarios coming in, the entire productivity and the engagement aspect is becoming that much more monitored or closely looked at. So we will have to find new ways of engaging our workforce. We'll have to find new ways of reskilling our workforce, and we'll have to find new ways of leveraging the technologies through the same workforce that we are having right now.
Are there any kind of initiatives that you are taking, at Piramal, doing this reskilling, skilling, or probably strengthening the skill network, which is there in the workforce?
Yeah, so learning has been an integral part of Piramal for as long as we have known Garima. So there is a lot of stress on two things. One is that how do you identify the most relevant technologies and bring them to the company, and how do you basically bring the workforce to speed with these technologies. So a lot of awareness sessions, a lot of learning modules, a lot of bite-sized learning modules are being made, and these are specific to the persona to which we are looking at. So, for example, there would be courses specifically for the salespeople. There would be courses for the top management. There would be courses for the field staff. There would be courses for the manufacturing staff. And these are all technology courses that are. I'm not talking about the behavioral or the normal functional related technology. So, a lot of meaningfully identified interventions are created, and we have a learning university as well, which we want to leverage in terms of making people, enabling them to learn anytime, anywhere at their convenience. So this has been a part of our culture. It has been a part of our offering for a while, and we continue to invest and grow in these areas.
Right, right, right. Perfect. So the process efficiency and agility has improved dramatically and proved to be very helpful in this pandemic situation. Your take on this?
Yes, and so I think there are two aspects to this. One is that some part of it was forced. For example, when the pandemic came in and the physicality went away, you had to identify ways of working remotely, and that's where I think a lot of stress into automation came in, where people were started looking at re-looking at processes to say that okay, what is it that we really need, and what is it that where is the flap that we can cut down on. And the second aspect, which I think has usually propelled this, is the entire robotic process of automation kind of technologies, which takes away the entire aspect of redundancy. It can, and now we are talking about intelligent bots, right? It's not just about automation; it's about intelligent bots. So it learns from the way the user works, and then it is augmenting, or it is becoming a co-worker of sorts. So I think the entire RPA, especially in the support processes, call it HR, be it finance, be it IT also, and a lot of self-service capabilities which people are deploying. For example, the entire password resets to be able to do it yourself. The entire aspects around bring your own devices. So I think all these minute things are all adding up to make a huge difference when it comes to the entire process automation or the process agility part of it. And the people are also, with the new technologies coming in, people are also looking at their process or re-looking at their process to say that okay, is this thing really the way we need to operate, or is there a completely different way of doing things? So I think a lot of design thinking, a lot of Six Sigma, Lean, these kind of concepts are being applied to be able to re-engineer the processes and make them much leaner, faster, meaner, and more amiable to the new digital technologies to be able to leverage them better.
So, do you think is it safe to say that the pharma industry is entering the metaverse and metaverse is the future, for the sector?
So that's a stretch, I would say. I think Metaverse and Pharma still have some distance to catch up to. I think you will see the impact of Metaverse more in the consumer-facing capabilities, or you will see them much earlier than the Metaverse. Then, for example, somewhere like a Pharma. But I think we will get there. It's largely a factor of what it delivers in some of the other places, and being able to pick up and learn from there and apply them to the sector that we are talking about. So in my limited opinion, I think it is some distance away, but it's not an impossibility.
Right, right. And considering where we are right now, how do you see the sector shaping up? I would not say 5 years, that's too long a stretch. We don't know where we are. But probably say in the next 2 to 3 years, how do you see the sector shaping up?
So I think the entire operational aspect of pharma will undergo huge change. I think it may, to the extent of it may completely, undergo a remake of sorts, or it may get a facelift of completely. with this entire, with two aspects. One is the entire industry 4.0 coming in, and the second is the 5G coming in. It provides you capabilities of remote manufacturing, remote monitoring, remote quality assurance, remote inspections, remote dispatches, and those kind of things. So I think while you will see this getting applied in industries like FMCG before it comes to pharma, but I think pharma will see a complete overhaul in these areas, and the way the manufacturing will move towards the complete smart manufacturing. The decision making will move towards decentralized decision making, and will move towards intelligent supply chains. For example, the way the product is manufactured and distributed today will be completely. I think it will go a complete overhaul. This entire cold chains and temperature controlled distributions and things like those. I think there are number of capabilities and startups who are working or on POCs or on concepts in these areas which are very pinpointed. And I think if they click and if they are able to roll it out at scale, these entire aspects will undergo a complete change. So I think it could the entire operational and the network aspects of pharma could complete the entire pharma ledger blockchain that we are talking about, right? And it could completely change the way the entire manufacturing aspects and the operational and the distribution aspects are being looked at. If that clicks and with more and more companies subscribing to it, I think it will make the operations much leaner and much more predictable and intelligent, if I may use the word. So I think we are in
Right.
for some exciting times in this sector.
Right, right, right. I also wanted to understand from you, like, we've talked about how digital disruption is pushing the healthcare and the pharma sector, and it's also changing the way care is being provided. So, how do how is the industry reimagining the role of technology when it comes to, patient care?
So just the other day, I came across Garima, that with this entire COVID aspect coming in, a lot of patients had to undergo, or a lot of suspects had to undergo CT scans, right, to be able to see as to what is the kind of damage that if he is infected, and what is the kind of damage that is caused to the lungs and stuff. And interestingly, while these options and these technologies are available, the number of places where this is available is number one limited, and the number of people who operate these technologies is again limited. And then these people who operate these technologies, they also run the risk of getting infected. So and it's basically the frontline workers that we are talking about, the entire COVID warriors kind of a scenario. Now interestingly, we came across an offering where the entire CT scan is being done remotely. So the patient is in the hospital or at the medical care facility, and he's undergoing a CT scan, but the person doing it is sitting remotely in a confined and an isolated environment, so that he doesn't get infected by it. So one more aspect was regarding the entire scans that happen for people. A complete 3D scanning machine which was available, which could actually draw layers of information from the scan, not just a single dimensional scan or multiple scans of single dimension. One scan, and it can do everything that is saying. It is a completely 3D kind of a 3D kind of a scan that it done, and it is able to cut it into, for example, what is there on the superficial part, what is there on the flesh part, what is there on the bone part, what is there at the organ part, and then it can get into the minute details of the entire aspect that you want to basically test. So I think the entire investments are in two areas. I would say one is the patient management or the patient care part of it, and the second is the entire hospital management or the administrative part of things. So, for example, today in any hospital you would walk in, it's largely all touchless. You're using bands, smart bands, which they give you, and then every station to station that you go, all you need to do is scan them, and they are able to track the entire. And by the time you are ready to walk out after completing, for example, your annual health checkup, the reports are ready. Whereas vis-a-vis, if you just look at it in recent history, it would normally take about 3 to 5 days for them to be able to give you the reports. So the entire patient care part of it, as well as the entire hospital management or the hospital administration part of it, completely going overall. And I think a lot of credit goes to the entire consumer industries which have brought these technologies, and now people are saying that, okay, if this can be done in a particular industry, why can't it be applied in consumer health? For example, if you subscribe to any of the online medicine management tools today, they go a step ahead to be able to provide you remote consultation also, talk to a doctor, talk to a specialist, or talk to a care facility. They are also monitoring your consumption patterns with the prescriptions. That, okay, now you're approaching a refill of for a particular drug that you are subscribed to, and would you like to reorder? Here is an offer that is available. So I think it's a completely reimagined space, and I think it will only uh, God only knows how much it can transform.
Right, right. Thanks. Also, digital and data go hand in hand, and we've seen the realms of data protection, data encroachment touching new heights. So, how do you see the industry preparing to deal with this in the coming times?
So data, you talk about data, talk about data security and data privacy. You look at it in these two aspects. So data security is something that, there is a regulatory aspect to it, and then there is something that the company has to, enterprise has to invest in by, by on its own, not rely on a regulatory framework, for example. And then there is a data privacy part of it. So the first and the foremost thing is that the entire data classification needs to happen, and we are already talking about data privacy act coming in, and it and it's on the anvil, and it's only now, a matter of time before it comes in. So then there will be a huge furor to be able to get into compliance aspects, and to comply to what is being said. So yes, it is an area of concern, and rightly so, I would say, because you're dealing with, as personal and information as it gets. It's about health records of people that we are talking about here. So yes, it is something that, I think will take its time to set in once it is crystallized, and it will also undergo some iterations, and to be able to bring it to a point where it becomes a well-oiled machinery. But yes, uh, like you rightly mentioned, and I also said that before, that with this digital transformation, it all relies on data. You're talking about more data available to be able to train the AI models. You're talking about data available to be decentralized the decision making. You're saying about talking about data being made available for the entire analytics, the deep learning part of it, and to be able to predict what we are talking about. So I think there is no dearth of data, but I think what we'll have to concentrate is on two things. One is how do we get relevant and meaningful data, and second is how do we safeguard it. So I think, and pharma, like I said, by the nature of industry, it will be a little more accentuated compared to some of the other industries. So every my recommendation to every company that's embarking upon a digital transformation would be to be data first, and not look at data in hindsight, or not look at security and privacy in hindsight, to say that okay, let us build the application, let us put the building blocks in place, and then look at the data security. It will have to be a part of the entire data fabric, or the information architecture as it is called, so that once these laws and recommendations are available, the frameworks can be applied in a little more seamless manner.
Right, right. And just one last question for the today. So, do you see a renewed involvement of business groups, in decision making in terms of IT strategies, or is it still left for the CIOs, the CTOs in silos, to work towards digital transformation?
No, no, no. I think those days are well past. Now every discussion is a technology discussion, and everybody understands the kind of benefit that a technology can deliver. Everybody understands that technology is something that can propel you maybe a couple of years ahead of where you are. So gone are the days when certain discussions would happen in the closed door, and the CIO would be called only for the execution. I think the CIO today has CIO, CDO, CTO, whatever the terminology you may use, today has a seat at the table with every important discussion on, for example, new customer acquisition, or expanding the current customer base, expanding the product portfolio, or looking at newer markets, which are core business decisions that that can be made. And the second is the entire the cost and the productivity aspect of it, where departments are approaching technology to say that okay, what can we do here to be able to become a little more smarter compared to what we are, rather than trying to add more and more people to be able to deliver the incremental amount of effort that goes in, or the incremental work that needs to be delivered. So I think clearly that line between business and technology is blurring. What used to be a silo or a compartment is now becoming a perforation, where you have technology being housed within business, and you have business representation within technology. And with things like AI, there is a lot of context that has to be applied. You just can't take an algorithm and expect it to work on its own, unless and until you contextualize to the business problem that you are talking about, which by essence means that the domain on the functional knowledge becomes of paramount importance. So I think it, like I said, every discussion is a technology discussion today.
Right, right. Thank you so much, Mr. Pandya. It was a pleasure listening to you, and to your very pointed views on this topic. So please accept this, a small token of appreciation from us for your presence, your time, and your insights at the Elets Third National CIO Virtual Conclave. Thank you so much, sir, for being here with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot very much. The pleasure is all mine.